I've always felt very strongly about it, and I've been watching very carefully what others have been doing.
She spent months building the case, quietly, behind closed doors, brick by brick. A mother who had already achieved the impossible, going from the most hated woman in Britain to crowned queen beside the king, now trying to do something that, on paper, actually made a kind of sense. She wanted her son to be given an official role representing the British monarchy, and Prince William didn't just say no. He dismantled the entire argument so completely, so methodically, and with such precise institutional logic that by the time he was done, Camilla had no choice but to withdraw the proposal entirely and walk away from the table. But here's what makes this story genuinely fascinating. It's not the fact that William blocked it, it's how he blocked it, and what he did instead, because the move he made revealed something about who actually holds power inside the House of Windsor right now. And it's a very different answer than the one Camilla was working from. Let's get into it. What Camilla was actually trying to do. First, let's understand what was actually being proposed here, because this was more significant than it might appear on the surface. Camilla was quietly pushing for her son, Tom Parker Bowles, to be given an official royal patronage. For those unfamiliar, a royal patronage is the arrangement where a member of the royal family becomes the official public face and institutional endorser of a charity, a medical foundation, a cultural institution, or a military regiment. It's not honorary. It's not ceremonial in a casual sense. When the royal seal is placed on an organization, it elevates that organization above commercial and political life. It's a deployment of the full prestige of the crown. Tom Parker Bowles is 50 years old. He's a food writer, a critic, a published author, someone who has built a genuine, respected career entirely in the civilian world. From Camilla's perspective, he was the ideal candidate. Comfortable in public, media-trained, well-connected, and with a track record of charitable involvement in his private life. And the argument she was building behind palace doors was actually quite clever. She wasn't simply saying, "Give my son a role because he's my son." She was framing it as a solution to a very real institutional problem. The working royal roster, she argued, has been reduced to a dangerously thin level. Harry is in California, permanently removed. Andrew is barred from public life. King Charles is managing his cancer treatment with a strictly limited schedule. The people available to handle the relentless tide of patronages, state events, and public engagements have shrunk to a handful, and the pressure on those remaining is becoming genuinely unsustainable. Her pitch was essentially, the monarchy needs reinforcements, rigid rules are a luxury we can no longer afford, and here is a capable, willing, already trusted individual ready to step in and help. Logistically, if you squint at it, you can almost see the appeal. William and Anne did not squint. The line, William drew. William and Anne weren't looking at this as a logistics problem. They were looking at it as a constitutional boundary problem. And the distinction matters enormously. A royal patronage isn't a celebrity endorsement. It isn't a PR arrangement. When a member of the royal family represents a charity or institution, the public understands, implicitly but deeply, that this person has surrendered their private life to the service of the state. That the representation is valid because the patron is a formal constitutional member of the House of Windsor, someone bound by birthright and by oath. The moment Tom Parker Bowles is placed in that role, something fundamental shifts. The public can no longer clearly distinguish between a bloodline member with a lifelong constitutional commitment to the crown and a private citizen who happens to be the son of the current queen consort. And that distinction is not a technicality. It is the foundation on which the monarchy's credibility actually rests. William and Anne also saw the precedent problem clearly. And this was arguably even more important than the immediate question of Tom himself. If the son of a queen consort can be quietly elevated to represent the crown today, what stops extended relatives of future monarchs from making the same demand tomorrow? Once that door opens even slightly, it doesn't close. The monarchy's legitimacy depends on a clearly defined, consistently maintained line between those who are constitutionally part of the institution and those who are personally connected to people within it. The moment that line becomes negotiable, even once, even for good reasons, it becomes permanently negotiable. So they refused, flatly, completely. But they didn't stop there. The procedural takedown. This is the part of the story that most people miss, because William and Anne didn't just vote no and move on. They turned the situation around entirely by attacking the process itself. They demanded a full, transparent audit of how the proposal had been handled. They asked whether the recommendation had actually gone through the strict formal scrutiny required for a decision of this magnitude. They raised the uncomfortable question that nobody in Camilla's corner wanted to answer directly. Had this proposal gone through the proper constitutional channels, or had it been fast-tracked through personal influence, exploiting the cover of the current personnel shortage? By focusing their challenge on the procedure rather than the person, they exposed something that became impossible to defend. The proposal lacked the institutional consensus required for a decision of this size. The normal, rigorous safeguards designed specifically to prevent nepotism and favoritism had not been fully deployed. And the moment that became clear, Camilla's camp lost the procedural ground they'd been standing on. The palace split into two camps. One side, supporting Camilla, argued that modern charities needed modern solutions and that the public would accept Tom's involvement if it meant vital national organizations could continue without disruption. The other side, William, Anne, and the senior civil servants and traditionalist courtiers who backed them, maintained that the monarchy's symbolic and constitutional integrity cannot be traded away for temporary logistical convenience. The British monarchy has survived for centuries precisely because it maintains unyielding boundaries between personal family relationships and official state authority. Those boundaries aren't bureaucratic inconvenience. They're the foundation. Princess Anne's involvement at this stage was particularly significant. She spent 5 decades cultivating a reputation as the most disciplined defender of protocol within the House of Windsor. When she lent her institutional weight to the debate, it shifted from a quiet policy disagreement to something closer to a formal constitutional standoff. Her voice carries the moral authority of 50 years of flawless service, and her insistence on proper procedure could not be dismissed as obstruction. William's countermove. Here is where William demonstrated exactly what kind of operator he is. A different person in his position might have stopped at simply blocking the proposal, said no, pointed to the rules, and left the manpower problem hanging in the air, which would have kept Camilla's argument partially alive. William didn't do that. Instead of just rejecting the proposal and leaving the institutional gap unaddressed, he immediately advanced an alternative that solved the problem, satisfied the constitutional requirements, and completely demolished the premise of Camilla's argument all at once. He proposed bringing forward Peter Phillips, the oldest grandson of Queen Elizabeth II and the son of Princess Anne, alongside Peter's new wife, Harriet Spurling. The tactical intelligence of this move was considerable. Peter Phillips holds a genuinely unique position. He's never held a royal title by his own parents' choice. He built a successful career entirely in the civilian world. Over 20 years of serious professional experience across Jaguar, Williams Formula One, and as managing director of SEL UK, working at the intersection of corporate management, marketing, and elite sports entertainment. Real professional credentials. Real-world experience. The kind of background modern charities, which increasingly need to run with the efficiency of commercial enterprises, can actually use. At the same time, Peter is a direct bloodline descendant of the late Queen. His connection to the crown is constitutional, not personal. He's the grandson of the monarch, precisely the kind of person the system was designed to accommodate. And then there was Harriet. Harriet Spurling is a pediatric nurse with frontline clinical experience that is genuinely rare within any royal or near-royal context. One of the central pillars of Catherine's public legacy has been her work with the Royal Foundation's Center for Early Childhood, focused on early childhood development and pediatric mental health. With Catherine currently managing her own health recovery alongside her constitutional duties, the palace was facing a real gap in those specific campaigns. Harriet's willingness to step forward, bringing actual medical expertise and clinical understanding to that exact space, provided something Camilla's proposal simply couldn't offer: a substantive, professionally grounded contribution to a specific priority area, from someone operating entirely within the existing constitutional framework, the Associate Royals model. What William and Anne effectively created through this arrangement is something being referred to as the Associate Royals model, and it's worth understanding properly because it's likely to shape how the monarchy operates for years. Under this framework, Peter and Harriet don't receive funding from the public purse. They don't take on formal aristocratic titles. They don't trigger political controversy or increase the financial burden on taxpayers. Instead, they operate as what you might describe as elite, specialized ambassadors. They volunteer their professional skills to specific high-priority campaigns. Every public appearance and statement they make is vetted and approved in advance by William's press office, ensuring complete alignment with the Crown's core messaging. A strict firewall exists between their public charitable work and their private professional lives. When Peter operates in his corporate capacity, he cannot use any royal branding. When they carry out charitable duties, they do so strictly as volunteering family members, with a controlled frequency of appearance specifically designed to preserve the unique value of the royal connection. The elegance of this solution is in what it does to Camilla's original argument. She had said, "The monarchy is understaffed, the remaining working royals are under unsustainable strain, and the only way to address this is with radical flexibility," meaning Tom. William's response was, "Here are two people, from within the bloodline, properly vetted, constitutionally sound, ready to serve at zero cost to the public wise. It's professional qualifications that are directly relevant to our priority areas." The claimed crisis dissolved instantly, and with it went the entire premise that Camilla's proposal had been built on: the collapse. Faced with that, the outcome was almost inevitable. The united front of William and Anne, backed by senior courtiers, backed by constitutional precedent, backed by a ready alternative that addressed every practical concern, and which cost the public nothing, proved impossible to argue against. A further attempt to push the Tom Parker Bowles appointment through would have required triggering a formal public constitutional debate within the royal councils. The prospect of that, of making this disagreement openly visible and on the record, was clearly untenable. So Camilla withdrew the proposal entirely, quietly, without a public statement, without a press release. The recommendation was cancelled, and that chapter closed. King Charles, according to sources, was satisfied with this outcome, which is worth pausing on because it tells you something important about his position in all of this. He didn't have to personally reject his wife's proposal. The system worked as it was designed to work. The constitutional safeguards held. William and Anne provided the exit ramp that allowed the matter to be resolved without Charles having to choose publicly between his wife and his heir. He was also reportedly pleased by Peter and Harriet's integration into the voluntary support network, viewing their uncompensated, willing commitment as a meaningful sign of intergenerational unity within the direct line of the house. Catherine's reaction, sources say, was one of genuine relief, particularly regarding Harriet's readiness to support the early childhood and pediatric health campaigns that have been so central to her own public work. What this actually reveals. So what does all of this tell us about where the monarchy actually stands right now? The first thing it tells you is that William's understanding of how power works in this institution is significantly more sophisticated than many people outside the palace fully appreciate. He didn't defeat Camilla's proposal by outranking her or by appealing to Charles. He defeated it by engaging on institutional and procedural grounds, and then by solving the problem she'd identified better than her own proposal could have done. He didn't just say no, he made her argument unnecessary. The second thing it tells you is something about Camilla's actual position within the institution she has spent so many years working to become part of. She is the crowned queen consort. She sits beside the king at every official state occasion. She has achieved a rehabilitation that would once have seemed genuinely impossible. But this episode revealed something important: that the institutional machinery of the monarchy, when it comes to questions of constitutional integrity, does not bend to personal influence, even the personal influence of the queen consort. And the person most responsible for ensuring it doesn't bend is the man who will be king next. William has been explicit for years about his position on this boundary. While Camilla deserves the respect her office commands, her children and relatives from her previous marriage are private citizens. They are guests at family celebrations. They are entirely separate from the machinery of the state. The moment that line softens, even slightly, even for a sympathetic reason, the credibility of the entire institution begins to erode. And that is not a trade William is willing to make. Not for convenience, not for harmony, not for anyone. There's a broader story here that's worth sitting with, because this episode didn't happen in isolation. It happened while Charles is managing cancer treatment and his capacity for sustained internal conflict is genuinely limited. It happened while the palace is publicly and deliberately boosting William's profile and preparing him for what comes next. It happened while Camilla is navigating her own health challenges and quietly beginning to reduce her public workload. Everything taking place inside the palace right now should be understood in the context of a transition that is underway. Not officially announced, not dramatically declared, but visibly, measurably in motion. William is not waiting for permission to begin shaping the institution he will lead. The Andrew situation showed that. The duchy decisions showed that. The patronage standoff showed that. The monarchy William is building will be smaller, more focused, more deliberately bounded, less patient with complexity and peripheral connections, more insistent on constitutional clarity and institutional purpose. And for Camilla's family, her children, her grandchildren, her broader circle, that vision has real and lasting consequences. Not because of personal animosity, but because in William's monarchy, the question that determines everything is very simple. What is your constitutional basis for being here? If the answer is anything other than birthright or formal oath, the answer, increasingly, will be, you're not. And that is what the defeat of the Parker Bowles proposal actually represents. Not a petty family dispute, not a power play driven by old grievances, a defense of constitutional integrity carried out with precision and institutional sophistication by the two people in the family who understand that integrity better than anyone else. Camilla argued there was a crisis. William solved it without her son. The crisis disappeared, the work continues, and the boundaries held. That's not just a political win, that's a statement about who actually understands the machinery of this institution and who was trying to use it for reasons that had nothing to do with the institution's needs. Now I want to hear your take. Do you think William is right to draw such a hard line? Or should a modern monarchy find more flexible ways to bring in capable people, whatever their bloodline? Leave your honest opinion in the comments below. The conversation down there is always worth reading. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of how power actually moves inside the palace, please hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. And if you're not yet subscribed, now is the time. We cover royal dynamics the way they actually happen, not the polished palace version. See you in the next one.